Okay, so let's start, all right? Anyway, my name is Alice Holland, and I'm the nurse practitioner here, and I'm going to introduce you to our guest in a moment. This is called Get Some. We do it once a month. It's a show about health with a human sexuality emphasis. So the topic changes each month. So I think you came to a really fun topic tonight because we're going to need your help with it, because there's just lots of different ways to define what we're going to talk about, and it's still an understudied topic. There's not a lot of research on it. It's friends with benefits, okay? So that's what we're going to discuss tonight. And I have with me Dr. Kesha Morant-Williams, and she is new here at Penn State Berks. She just joined us in the fall, and she's with the Communication Arts and Sciences department, so that's fun. Anybody have her in class?
I saw
No? One
yeah,
person.
I was going to say, I see
Okay.
2 hands.
All right, what courses do you teach here?
Right now I'm teaching group comm, like the one that everybody has to take, like
Okay.
the 100 ABC type sequence.
Yeah.
But next semester I'll teach classes in the major, more specific, like research methods, family comm, all that good stuff for the comm folks out there.
Yeah, so look for that name when you're registering, okay? And she,
Here's some hands.
oh, do we have a question?
Sorry, can you repeat your name?
Spell it, please.
Repeat my name?
Or my name.
Oh, I was gonna
It's
say.
Kesha, Kesha, Morant, Morant, Williams. That part's probably pretty easy.
Yeah.
Kesha Morant Williams.
Keisha has her PhD in communications and culture from Howard University. And she has done some research in relationships and communication and health, and I'm getting my PhD in human sexuality, so when I met her I was like, oh, instant friends, because we have the same interests in what we study. So that's really cool, and I'm really glad to have her here, so thank you. But anyway, so we're going to talk about friends with benefits, and we thought, like, we try to sort of break it down into pieces, and we thought first we would define it, and then talk about the emotional aspect of it, and then maybe popular culture and the media, and then maybe wrap it up with health issues. But we need your help in the definition because, you know, relationship science is fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new field where, you know, relationships used to be discussed by like philosophers and poets, and I would say only since maybe what, the 1960s did they really study relationships. So it's such a new field in human sexuality, so we need your help because sometimes some of the topics really aren't clear. We don't have a lot on it. So what do you think? How would you define friends with benefits?
And shake off all this bashfulness. I'm seeing like some little nervous faces and twinges. It's just a conversation.
I don't want to be hearing crickets.
It's just a
Oh yeah, and if you
conversation.
participate, you get a gift too. Yeah. Julie, did you have your hand raised? Go ahead. Oh, okay. So she defined it as dangerous.
Okay.
What do you think? And there's no right or wrong answer. How else would someone else what do you think of when you think of friends with benefits? What do you think? What do you think that means? I see a hand all the way in the back. I just can't see your face. Oh, hey.
When I think of friends with benefits, I think of fun, but dangerous. But I think it's a fun time. Why not?
Okay, so a fun time. All right. But potentially dangerous. Okay, and we'll talk about ways that maybe you could decrease that danger. Who else had a hand raised? Yes.
No strings attached.
Okay.
Okay, good. So that's one of the things that may come along with it is no strings attached. What else when you think of friends with benefits? You're missing the big part about it.
There definitely are some more thoughts out there. Don't be shy. Just jump in.
I think it's sex without monogamy, and
Okay.
I think that it causes a lot of emotional distress, even if guys don't want to admit it.
Okay, so you said sex without monogamy, and it can cause a lot of emotional distress even if guys don't want to admit it. Are you
I think it causes it more for girls, but you can get attached.
okay?
Okay.
And men, what do you think about that? Do you think it can cause emotions for men also, or do you think more so for women?
Women.
More so for women? Yeah.
I think it's people that are too pathetic and coward to engage in a monogamous relationship.
Okay.
They're too afraid of getting hurt where you get hurt anyway.
Okay, so they're too afraid of getting hurt in a monogamous relationship, so they choose that type of relationship? Okay. What are some pros? Let's break it down to pros and cons. We said a lot of cons. Any pros? Yes. Okay. So pro is sex, yeah.
No attachment.
No attachment. Anybody? Go ahead.
You don't spend any kind of money on like
Oh, okay, you don't have to spend money. They actually did a study on the cost of, what was it, the cost of dating or how? Yeah.
There definitely was one that looked at the cost of dating, and I think that comment about you not having to spend any money is actually a really interesting one, because in some research that I did on Friends with Benefits, that was one of the ways that folks determined if they were in a committed relationship versus a Friends with Benefits relationship. And so if the person says, oh, if I'm just sleeping with him or I'm just sleeping with her, I don't care if that person doesn't buy me things, or I don't care if that person doesn't do the extras. So that's actually a really good point. But can we jump back? I think someone mentioned along the way that they think women get attached more or have more of an emotional attachment than men within that. And I was hoping that someone would have maybe taken that and ran with that a bit. Do we, you know, maybe not necessarily your personal experiences, but do we have anything that supports that? Or is that something that we sort of embrace and assume because of the media?
Go ahead.
I think it just goes back into double standards. And what a guy's supposed to be and what a woman's supposed to be.
Like a stereotype?
I guess go back to stereotyping. I think to be for a man, I would be physically attracted for a woman to have, or to be openly about this, openly having multiple partners. But you know, in the media today, for a man to do it's not that bad. Yeah. Unless you're a celebrity, man.
Anyone else? What, you know, before this I looked up Friends with Benefits online and under Urban Dictionary, and there were like 38 different ways that it was defined, and a lot of them covered pretty much what all of you said, plus many, many more. But what does your research show? How does it describe Friends with Benefits?
Well, I mean, Friends with Benefits definitely covers most of the areas that all of you talked about, but I would say the defining factor is that lack of commitment. And so within that, it removes sort of what we would say your assumed right to get upset with your partner about certain things. Like if you're just my friends with benefits, if I'm just sleeping with you, or if I'm just hanging out with you, I can't get upset if you don't call, or I can't, get upset if I see you with someone else. And oftentimes that's where that murkiness comes in regards to the definition, because we enter these thinking that we can do this without emotional attachment, that, this is something that we both have perhaps agreed upon, as adults making a decision. But in other cases, it isn't necessarily that simple. It isn't like that you sat down and had a conversation and said, we're going to enter this friends with benefits situation. We aren't going to, get any emotional attachment, and then we're going to be able to just remain friends. So the definition is very broad, and it includes all of the elements that you've talked about. And, as you've mentioned, this area of research is insane. Like it's growing in leaps and bounds. And when I started digging into this, even just 3 years ago, I couldn't find too much. Whereas now, when we were talking about preparing for this, I did a search, and the articles were just pouring in, like in academic journals as well as in, mainstream magazines. So it's definitely very popular.
And how about it can change with time too? So you think you have this definition, and you think that you have this relationship, but then someone threw emotions in there, and then when emotions spark, whether it's the man or the woman, then things can change, and that's where you get into the murkiness.
And that's also something that's very important to point out when we talk about friends with benefits relationships, is no matter how it started, perhaps you were in a relationship, or someone that is in a situation of where you had that conversation from the onset of that this is not a committed relationship, this is what we are doing in this instance. And one person develops emotions, the other person doesn't. the murkiness occurs. In other cases, maybe that conversation didn't occur. Maybe you just started hanging out with someone, and so you don't necessarily know if this is a budding romantic relationship or if this is friends with benefits. So again, that murkiness occurs, and that emotions begin to rise in there, and that tension begins to occur, and then we find ourselves in this position of, oh my goodness, what am I in? Am I in a relationship, or am I just sleeping with this person?
And what can you do about that to clarify it? What? Right, communicate, ask, talk about it. Very, very important. What, someone else is going to say something.
I was going to say just be straightforward. Like, just let them know what it is. Like,
Okay.
it started out as just being friends with benefits, and if you're getting attached, then maybe we shouldn't do this no more.
Good point. An awesome transition, because I know one of the questions that we received talked about that, is what happens if you start out, you talked, you were honest from the beginning, and then someone catches feelings along the way. Like, are you allowed to continue this friends with benefits relationship? Like, what happens then if you started out in this pattern, someone catches feelings, and then what happens?
What do you do? So it's almost like you set the rules, like you set the standards, and then feelings come into play. So what do you do about that? Because we don't have literature on that. Go ahead.
I feel like if it was a mutual agreement and then one person start getting feelings, then then I think they should talk about them. Like, well, I'm not feeling that way, so maybe we should stop so nobody won't get hurt, and we can just slow it down, and maybe we could start over. But if you just continue to keep being in a relationship, this type of relation with the person, and I think it's going to make the situation worse if one person only feels a certain way.
That's good. Were you going to say something? No? Okay.
It almost sounds like a contract of sorts, the way you just described it. And I mean, there is literature that supports relationship contracts. And while we don't necessarily go to our romantic partner and say, here's our contract, these are the rules of our relationships, these are the emotional rules, these are our, interpersonal rules, let's sign this and this is how we function, we do function that way. There are certain rules and there are certain expectations that we have within our romantic partnerships. And, based on the example that you shared, it supports that within that instance, at least, you felt that the relationship rules were violated. And then it seems that in that case, that friends with benefits relationship would probably end.
Yeah. But if the other person, if they was both starting to feel emotionally attached, then maybe that friends with benefit was like a stepping stone.
Right, into what someone said, more of a monogamous relationship. And I guess it could be a stepping stone. What do you think?
I think that's an awesome question for our audience, because again, I've conducted research on this with college students that the same age range as all of you, different areas, some in this area as well, and there weren't very many that believed that friends with benefits could turn then into a committed relationship. But who knows, maybe you all have some different stories or some different examples of where that was the case. We got a couple of smiles, but no responses. So is that possible? Is it possible to take a friends with benefits relationship and turn it into a committed monogamous relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I had personal experience that I had a relationship that went for 13 months, and before that, me and her were actually friends with benefits, so it worked out.
And then did you talk about it to make it go into more of a permanent relationship, or did it just sort of happen?
Yeah, I think we just started acting more like we're in a relationship, and then eventually it was just set in stone.